people try to manage their investment portfolio on their own without the help of a financial advisor. Some are fairly successful at it, but DIY investing can go badly wrong. Why? Because human beings often act irrationally, especially when it comes to money. Here's Wes Krill from Dimensional Fund Advisors.
We know that humans in general sometimes struggle with decision making. There are a lot of biases that creep in. For example, we will typically attribute all of our successes to skill and all of our failures to luck. We tend to overweight things that happen more recently. There's a lot of things that creep in when we're making our judgments, and what this can lead to is making adverse decisions. And I think, and again, that's human nature. One of the nice, aspects of the research on behavioral biases is that you become aware of them. And once you're aware of them, then you can control or you can avoid falling prey to them. But then it also leads us to having a really good framework that's based on data. We find that whether it's in investing, you're starting to see this more and more in sports as well, the more data-driven our decisions become, the less susceptible we are to these behavioral biases.
So, being aware of your behavioral biases is very important. The problem is, people often have behavioral blind spots, and they need someone who understands investor behavior to point them out.
Yeah, another way you can avoid falling prey to behavioral biases is to have an objective third party, to have an intermediary like a financial advisor who is helping you with your decisions and helping condition good behavior and helping to show you a path and keeping you on the course, sticking to your asset allocation. It's not unlike a personal trainer. I don't think most people hire a personal trainer because they can't count to 10. They hire a personal trainer to keep them dedicated and to keep them committed to what they're doing. And just like in personal training and exercise, we tend to see in the data that has led to more reliable outcomes for investors.
So it's very important to choose an advisor who sees the value in behavioral coaching, in stopping you making the wrong decisions. There are, however, two other crucial things to look for in an advisor. The first is a firm belief in investing as opposed to speculation.
When I think about speculation, I sometimes go back to an example of flipping a coin, right? So if you flip a coin more and more and more times, you generally don't expect it to end up where it's 55% heads and 45% tails. You expect it to be closer to what the unconditional probability would be, which would be 50-50. And I think where that ties in with gambling is that if you're paying a cost to flip the coin, what you end up with over the long haul, think about what would be the most likely outcome over the long haul, is that I'm going to have a negative expected return from that. If you spend enough time in the casinos, the house always wins, right? When I think about investing, I think that is something where the long-term odds are in your favor to have a positive outcome. And that's what we really seek out when we're talking about investing. And that means it needs to have a reasonable basis for a positive expected return. Speculation in certain types of assets where your positive return relies on something that maybe is a coin flip, well, that's not what we think about when it comes to stocks and bonds. Stocks issue you a claim on future cash flows that has a positive expected return. Bonds provide you a stated rate of interest as a positive expected return. And I think that at the end of the day is probably the biggest distinction between investing and speculation.
One of the reasons why so many investors and indeed advisors attempted to speculate is that they lack the statistical sophistication required to distinguish luck from skill. So a third characteristic to look for in an advisor is a thorough understanding of the data.
Anytime we're using statistics, what we're trying to do essentially is to figure out whether something happened by chance alone. So, again, if I think about a coin flipping experiment, if I have one person who's flipping a coin 10 times, they get 10 heads in a row, it's about 1 in 1,000 chance. So you think for one investor, it seems pretty unlikely. If you put 1,000 people in a room, it'd be a pretty big room, I guess like a ballroom, but 1,000 people, you actually would expect one of them to get 10 heads in a row or 10 tails in a row just by chance alone. So that's what we're trying to do with statistics, is to try and understand what the distribution is, and then we can measure statistics. We can measure things like t-statistics, basically how far removed something is from the average. And you measure the distance between the average itself and the distance from that average using historical data. And that helps us really understand whether something is just an anomaly in the historical data, or whether it's something we can count on going forward. It's increasing the odds of getting a successful outcome. There's no guarantees in life with any of this stuff, but the more data we throw at it, the more stats we use to characterize things, the more we up our odds. And again, if I think about the reverse of gambling, if I can tilt the odds against the house in my favor, 51% versus 49%, the more trials I have, the more likely I am to have a positive outcome.
To summarize, human beings often struggle to make rational decisions, particularly regarding money. Working with an objective third party like a financial advisor to keep you on track can be very helpful. However, it's vital to choose an advisor who strongly believes in investing rather than speculating. You should also look for an advisor who understands statistics and who can distinguish luck from skill. Thank you to Wes Krill from Dimensional Fund Advisors, and to you for watching.